welcome to everyone from around the globe who is joining us today for a celebration and a conversation with the 10 authors of Changing Conversations for a Changing World, Volume 2, from the European CIQ Collective. I'm Cheryl Benton, and I'm the founder and publisher of The Three Tomatoes and The Three Tomatoes Book Publishing. And we have had the honor of publishing both books, Changing Conversations for a Changing World, the first one, and now the one that we're here today to talk about. And I'm just so honored to have been a part of this. COVID, as we know, upended our world in many ways, both personal and business. And in the business world, it has changed the course of how we do business. The workplace of the future will look different than it did before the pandemic. And the authors of this book are 10 business coaches from around the world who, like many of us, were challenged with transforming their own businesses to an all virtual environment. And in this groundbreaking book, they share case histories and stories of their experiences. They talk about what worked well, in some cases, what didn't work quite so well, and some of the new tools and practices that they use that can be carried forward into the future. So before I bring in the authors, because you're going to get a chance to hear from all 10 authors today, I'm very excited about that. I want to introduce Tanya Murphy Ilibashik. I hope I pronounced that right. I probably didn't. So let me bring you in, Tanya. Welcome, Tanya. So glad to see you today. So Tanya hails from Germany, and she's a corporate coach and a communications specialist. And you are also the initiator and now the chair of the European CIQ Collective. So could you first tell our viewers what the collective is about and what your mission is?
Thank you for the introduction, Cheryl, and a big thank you for the invitation to join you here with the other authors. So I feel very honored to be here. So to address your question, basically we're a collection of coaches who bring all sorts of expertise to the table, but something that each one of us shares is that we're all certified in conversational intelligence for coaches. And this is Judith E. Glazer's groundbreaking work. And I know that's the second time we've used groundbreaking within a few minutes, but I do feel that it is an appropriate word to insert at this point. And this is what brought us together. Some of the members of the association had already completed their certification. As I was then going through my process, there were so many interesting voices throughout the whole certification process, which was a very, very large number of people. And that need to share our experience, to draw on each other, to strengthen each other, support each other. And, that whole concept of collaborating and understanding that together we are so much stronger than we are as individuals, and that you also have people who are there and they're willing to step up in a way to question what you do, to help you gain other perspectives. And this is so key for the work that we actually do within organizations and with others, because we are not infallible, and that we have to accept as well. So, growing yourself and understanding yourself better every day with every encounter is a big part of what we do. And that's what we bring then into the clients we work with.
Well, it's wonderful, and you're really doing great work, and you're just an incredible group of people that I've had the privilege of getting to know over the last year and a half, I guess it's been. So tell us how the two books came about, because the first one came out in 2020. I guess it started written in 2020.
End of 2020, I believe so. Yeah.
Yeah.
So the books came about because, of course, as with everybody, everyone in the world, we were confronted with the whole pandemic situation. And for our line of work, there's certain similarities that kept coming up. We were having a lot of conversations, considering how can we not only manage it ourselves, but support others at the same time. So we had an online conference where we were looking at topics that people so people could take actionable steps to really help themselves to maintain their mental well-being, to understand how can I approach and so business challenges, approach them, and potentially on the road to, I'm not going to say mastering, because I find that really goes to the complete other extreme, but certainly managing them better, better and better. Perhaps that's the more appropriate expression. And at some point, we then thought this would be best captured in a book. We have so many diverse stories because of the diversity within the association itself, our the countries we originate from, the languages we work with, the cultures we work with, our own background and history we bring in, and all of the diverse experience we bring to the table, which is just immense as a total. The first book focused very strongly on conversational intelligence and how that plays into everything we do. And I know I'm speaking for everybody here, but I hope that that this is true. And I'm not sort of making statements about somebody that aren't. But I think this is something that we share, and we say that this is just an embodiment that we bring with us and we're constantly aware of, or we try to be aware of. Now, the difference to this second book is here we're pulling in other strengths, other thoughts, other frameworks, methods. But again, the intention behind this is to help people, whether it's business people, other facilitators, coaches, whoever it may be, to understand there's many ways and of addressing situations, looking at situations, and solutions can look very different. And it's not easy. It is not easy. There are no simple solutions. That, working with people is a complex matter. And if you can embrace that there's huge complexity here at play, then perhaps it's easier to also embrace different perspectives or approaches, to try things out, see if it works, adapt, and constantly in this conversation with others.
Well, that's terrific. And thank you. And both books are so wonderful. And by the way, I should say that both books are available on Amazon and booksellers everywhere. And you might want to start with the first one, which gives you a sense of conversational intelligence, which certainly plays a continuing role in the newest book, which we're going to hear about. And of course, all of that is sharing so many experiences of all the coaches during the pandemic and how everyone had to pivot. So Tanya, thank you so much for being here today. I really appreciate it. And we're going to say goodbye to you now. And I'm going to start bringing in the first 5 of our coaches. And just give me a second to do that. And they are the authors of the first 5 chapters of the book. And I'm going to introduce each of them to you in just a moment as I add them to our stream. And it just takes a second to bring everyone up from the green room, our fancy green room, where they're enjoying lush appetizers. We wish. And let me see. I have Linda to bring in and Kristen. Well, greetings, everyone. So here are our very first 5 coaches. We're so happy to have you here today. And I'm going to start with introductions. We have Katarina Walecki Haglund. She's a trainer, coach, and a change facilitator who hails from Stockholm, Sweden. Next up, we have Karen Ovari. Karen is a safety leader and a creator from Newburgh, Scotland. And she's also one of the authors in the first book as well. Next, we have Deborah Goldsby. Deborah is a coach, a facilitator, and a consultant who is based in Cold Spring, New York, which is not too far from New York City. And Linda Keller is a team and leadership development coach from Herrenberg, Germany. And then we have Christian Delez. He is a team and leadership development coach from Switzerland. And Christian was also one of the authors of the first book. So As Tanya writes in the foreword to Volume 2 of Changing Conversations, when the world came to a halt, many of us felt overwhelmed and helpless. And each of you as individual coaches, I know we're faced with what often seem like insurmountable obstacles to just keep your own businesses going. So I'd like to just do a little quick round robin with each of you and tell me briefly what were some of your thoughts in the early days. So Katerina, I'm going to start with you.
Yeah, you will actually follow my whole process of going through the change curve in my chapter, and it did start with denial, as so many of us were feeling and thinking. This will pass, and I don't have to do much different, and well, it's gonna work fine. And of course, it did not. So it continued with all the other phases of anger and frustration and worry, actually real worry, which it was a while since I was faced with real worry on how my economy, but also in the whole type of work that I'm doing, how's it going to be?
Exactly. And Karen, how were you feeling in those early days?
For me, the whole early part of this pandemic was a bit of a whirlwind, as some of the others on the authors here will be attest to. We sort of I didn't really have time to think about it an awful lot. It was like, okay, let's pivot. We got to do something else, And I was, I guess, very fortunate to be brought into the virtual realm almost at the end of February of 2020. And I haven't left, actually. And in fact, have created a new business since then, created new tools, using all of these fabulous tools, got certified in a few other bits and bobs. One like psychological safety, which is really important for the virtual realm as well as the safety world. How to be how to help people understand how to work in that virtual space. So I've done a lot of work in this area over the last 2 years. And so the chapter is actually about how we converted a 2-day, highly
right, which we're going to get into. We're going to get back to that.
No, I wasn't going to say anymore.
You're all going to get a chance to talk about your chapter. Okay. So, Deborah, what were your initial thoughts in those early days? What were you feeling?
Yeah, well, my initial thought was I was scared. My neighbor died in the middle of March of 2020 because of COVID. So I was really just so scared. And like Karen, I got pulled into a situation where I learned a whole lot about virtual work and virtual collaboration and virtual presentation really quickly. So I was scared, and I was also brought into a space where I didn't have time for fear because I was just thrown into figuring out how to be a presenter virtually. And I learned so much from that. So I'm scared, and I was really grateful for the opportunity as well.
Great. And Linda, what about you? Linda, you have to unmute though.
Sorry, you told us. I've sort of had mixed feelings. I was scared for everybody. I was fearful. We've all worried that we all knew that one day there was going to be another pandemic. But we were also sort of quite, nobody really thought it was going to take that long. Like in fact, in one of my courses, we even had bets, and the longest time it was going to be was May, June. Everybody thought it was going to be over. But the other thing I had felt was absolute relief in one way, and that was because in November 19, I had persuaded the dean to let me take an intercultural communication course that I was giving in a master's program, to take it online, because the students said they couldn't do something because they didn't live close enough together. And I said, hello, we are in the 21st century, So I spoke to the dean and I said, listen, these people really need to know how to work online. So I was able to take, in the whole of December, take all my courses online. I went to England, actually, because that's where I hail from. And I did everything from online. The students did it. They loved it. They absolutely adored it. So when this came, I sort of thought, wow, if all else fails, I'll still be able to do my university courses.
Excellent. And Christian, what about you?
Yeah, by me, it was interesting. For community work, I had already years of experience of doing online work. And I'm an internal coach. So during the beginning of the pandemic was the situation where we shift from, let's say, mainly office work to 100% remote work overnight. I'm working in IT and software, so let's say the infrastructure was not an issue. And it was then the thing to say, okay, now I have to bring my full capability and I have to facilitate the switch and to make sure we're going to be okay online. So for me, it was, let's keep aside the ILTI part of the pandemic. If I focus just on the work part, for me, it was the enabler of saying, we're going to show everyone it is possible and we're going to make it. And that was a real interesting thing. How can you, in the remote world, how can you handle the small talk? How can you handle the informal talk? You have no coffee break anymore. You have to create new stuff. How can you engage people? How do people think? How do people live being at home? And this has been some absolute amazing learning throughout all the 2020.
Yeah. Well, I think I thank you all for sharing that, because I know everyone viewing this has probably went through very similar emotions. You know, some people just froze. But I love how you all really pivoted and then saw the opportunities that you could really create in the situation. And I want to start with Katarina. And one of the reasons that her chapter is chapter 1 in the book, and it's titled Taking My Own Medicine, A Personal Case History in the Change Curve. And it really, you personally describe how you went through each phase of that change curve. And I'm sure every one of us here can relate to that. So, and as you say, you started with the shock and denial phase. So I'm going to ask you to unmute yourself and then tell us a little bit about how you navigated through this. And I think it also helps people understand the change curve, which we may not know we lived through, but we did.
Yes, thank you. Looking back, which is easy to do now, and it's always seems easier looking back, I've gone really from that frustration to enthusiasm and to innovation. But it was interesting to really go through that, what we often take our leaders through, and talk to them about helping their staff to go through. It's a bit painful when it hits yourself. And I was arguing in the beginning to that things are not the same online, and because I had been online too, but always in between physical modules and leadership programs and things like that. But to think that we're going to do a whole program online, I was really not in the co-creative, innovative state from the beginning, which you can read a little bit more about. But I've summarized a few of the learnings, and one is support, because I have 2 fabulous colleagues, Patrick Stahl with Perfect Life in Malmö, and Katarina Kentel in Kentel Consulting, also in the south of Sweden. And without them, I would not be where I am today, because they were really supportive in when I was doubting to what to do and how to do things. And so support is one really important thing, and which now makes me encourage support even more than I actually knew. Of course, it was important, but super important. The other one is courage, and that helps with support as well. And I am a tester. I'm an early adopter in many technical ways. So I think it helped me to not be afraid of the technical part, and just how bad can it be? Someone can help me, and so forth. Then, of course, another aspect that I hadn't thought about was the difficulty in, once I had been more on the upgoing curve of the change curve, seeing that there might be a great future in this. And as was said before in the introduction, actually this can really help me work in remote places I'm doing that now from Italy, and that works fine. And that's a fantastic opportunity to work more with global clients and so forth. But the thing I had not seen was to also help my clients through the change curve on daring to try, on also believing that it can be as good in many instances and better in other instances to work online in this way. So with help also from the most innovative clients that I have, particularly in Mölnlycke Healthcare, Sonal, if you are here, without you, it wouldn't have been the same. So that's been great as well. Small steps.
Well, thank you for sharing some of the highlights in that chapter, because it's a fascinating chapter, and it's one that I think every single person viewing today will appreciate, and probably went through it, many of those same feelings. So thanks for sharing that. So now we're going to move over to Karen. Karen, your chapter is titled Bringing a Traditional 2-Day Workshop to Life Virtually. And you start off your chapter by telling how in November of 2019, you were invited to design a 2-day safety workshop that was going to be delivered in person around the world. Oh my gosh, this sounded like a dream come true, right? You were going to Europe, Africa, the Americas, South Pacific, and the kickoff was taking place in February of 2020, just before COVID took over the world. So tell us what happened and what were some of the lessons that you learned and how you were able to pivot this.
So my client and I, we spent lots of hours designing this innovative 2-day safety leadership program. And we were excited about getting it started. And we started, the first one was live in person, which was in February. And it went fabulously well at a fabulous venue, and all the things that you want out of a live workshop. And it was designed 2 days, not a PowerPoint slide in sight, which we're very proud of. And then the next one was in the early parts of March, which was done in the Americas. I didn't go to that one, but however, they got back just in time before everything went into full lockdown. And of course, that was that. We thought, oh, now what? But as I alluded to earlier, I got invited into, I've always been a remote coach, for example. I've always used technology. I've been a remote worker for 20 years. So that wasn't so big a deal for me. But, then moving into, I got picked up and sort of taken onto this virtual journey of how do we present events and how do we engage people even more so in this way, not just one-on-one, but one-to-many. We had fire chats and we had all sorts of wonderful things, and it was hugely successful. And during that process, I came across a product with the one that some of you are sitting on today, called Housebase, and instantly fell in love with this tool. And so I had this idea that maybe I should have a conversation. Now we're now talking towards, where are we? Probably March, April. I'm thinking, maybe we can convert this. How can I take this 2-day workshop and bring it to life? So I spent a weekend pondering this and created a version of it. And then I had a conversation with my client, Emmanuel, who is, hi, I know she's here, and said, what do you think about this? Do you think it's possible? And of course, the conversation goes along. I'm like, yeah, that's fantastic. It's very exciting. But, let's just wait and see. This will be over soon, and I think we all lived through that. Well, how long is this really going to take? So then, of course, August, we're like, okay, maybe we need to think about this. So we then went through and did a proper rebuild, and we kicked off back then in, September, and off we went. And history, I'm now still running that program. It's turned into a 4-month immersion program, and we deliver it this way around the globe. I'm up to cohort 15 nearly. So
it's such a great story, and your chapter has really, really wonderful lessons that you learned through all of this.
Absolutely.
Another great chapter. Yeah. So now we're going to move over to Deborah. Deborah, your chapter is titled Loss, How a Traumatic Public Event Inspired a Safe Virtual Workshop. And your story starts in June of 2020, which was shortly after the public outrage and the protest in the United States and probably globally around the murder of George Floyd. And you got a request from a client asking you to lead a virtual workshop for 6,500. And you did not mishear that, 6,500 municipal employees that would allow people a safe space to express their feelings about the impact of event. Now, that was a daunting assignment on many, many levels. So give us some highlights of how you approached that, Deborah, and what were some of the lessons that you learned from this?
Thank you, Cheryl. I want to clarify one piece. That 6,500 is an accurate number. Those are the people who are working within the municipality. We, in fact, we didn't know how many people were going to end up in our Zoom room. And we really wanted to give people the space to be able to feel safe, to speak freely, to feel supported, to feel heard. And it was a daunting process because we didn't know how people were going to enter the space. You know, we had promised a safe opportunity. And although we promised it, I wasn't quite sure if I was going to deliver upon that promise. But we took a lot of time. My co-facilitator and I took quite a bit of time to consider what the outcomes were that we wanted for the people who attended, and how we were going to prime the space for trust building. And that does go quite a bit back to conversational intelligence, is priming space, priming myself for the environment and for the facilitation. And it turned out to be a successful event because of all of the behind the curtains stuff, all of the preparation, all of the troubleshooting about what we knew and what we didn't know before anybody entered the room, the virtual room. We spent a lot of time thinking about how we can leverage the virtual space to create safety, as opposed to, in hindsight, recognizing that if this had been a live event, it would have actually not gone as well. So we were able to create the safe container, even though when people walked in, they had feelings of anger and confusion and exhaustion and helplessness. Now, these are all states that are not great from a brain function to create safe space, but we were able to create that safe container, and we were able to provide the safety for people to share what was on their minds and in their hearts. And it was a wonderful expression of how we can create trust and safety in the virtual space. So it was a really wonderful experience. Scary going in and really powerful leaving.
Well, it's such a fascinating case history, Deborah, and there are so many lessons in there of what went well, and where you realize you also things that needed to change. But that was congratulations on that very daunting assignment that you brought to a successful fruition. So we're going to move over to Linda, and Linda, your chapter is titled How to Create Dynamic Virtual Presentations and Seminars. And like the three authors that have just preceded you here, you are also presented with a unique opportunity to substitute a face-to-face with an online training session. And you had certainly, as you say in the chapter, you had experience in, presenting virtually and also attending. But this time you started to think about this differently, and you talk about the why, the who, the what, and the how of the presentation. And I have to tell you, I found this such a wonderful how-to, and I personally gained a lot of insights on presenting better in a virtual environment from your chapter. So tell us a little more about this.
Yeah. Okay. So what was different about this was, we all talked about that. Some of us had worked online. I'm not the technical whiz kid that Karen is. And one of the big things that I had, challenges I had, was that they wanted me to do it on a platform that I hadn't used before. This is a lot to do with data security. A lot of the platforms they weren't going to access, and this is where I was really challenged to remain open, to be really, and I think those are the most important lessons that I actually personally take out of this, is things that I knew beforehand and things that came across from that I'd also learned through CIQ, and also learned through the experience that we'd had when Tanya mentions at the very beginning that we did this conference, this virtual conference together. That gave me a certain amount of, it doesn't always have to go 100% right. So I had to be ready to be very open to change. I think that's incredibly important, to be ready to experiment, something Judith Glaser always told us. I have always been a bit of an experiment, to be quite honest. I've not always been good at accepting that not everything will be perfect, but I had to do that in order to do this, and I had to trust in myself. And I think those are probably, for me, the main lessons that I took. My chapter is exactly about, rather like Karen's, about how I went about organizing is taking the challenge, how I went through deciding what to do and why to do it the way that I did. And I took the similarities of a normal face-to-face presentations training. And I thought this is actually a great opportunity, because I'd often wondered why all presentations, or most presentation trainings, are face-to-face. You learn how to walk across the stage, how to take eye contact, and all those things. And now and by that stage, even 80% of the presentations that were given are actually online. So I thought it was actually, this is something missing here. This is a great opportunity to bring this, because I don't think that after this, it will ever go away again. So I went through just the setup, how do you create your environment? How do you look as though you're looking at the participants? You can't look at the pictures, because then it looks like this. This is now when I'm looking at you. This is when I'm looking into the camera. You see the contact that you have. You can't have contact. You can't engage with anybody the way that you can, but you can still inspire. And that's what it's about.
Thank you, Linda. And I realize I've already violated that rule several times today, because you just want to go look at the person you're talking to. So I'm going to keep that one in mind a little more mindfully. So now we're going to move over to Christian. So Christian, oops, I just lost my little thought here. Oh, so your chapter is titled Multipath to Virtual Online Co-Creation Sessions. And your expertise is working with teams to facilitate co-creation. And in the chapter that you wrote in the first book, you talk a lot about how you do that in a face-to-face world. And in this chapter, you talk about how you were able to transition co-creation, which is really not an easy thing to try to figure out how to do online, but how you're able to take those skills and techniques to the online environment. So tell us a little bit about how you were able to translate face-to-face into the virtual online world.
Yes. So the interesting thing is to answer the question, how can we enable people to have a great conversation and great session where they really co-create? And we kind of know the theory. However, online, remotely, is much harder. So there's some things which are informal, which you don't remember or you don't notice you do them, and you have to recreate them. So basically, there's some challenge like engaging all the participants online without feeling them. So you have to make some feeling explicit. There's some way to do this, which I explain, like check-ins and round question where you can start with it. And all the in-between session are also important. I'm working with some engineer employees, and they're permanently solving challenges. And one particularity is that they cannot solve it on their own. They need colleagues and they need to interact with one another to solve the challenges. And one thing is that sometimes you start a session and you think, or you have the goal to have the solution at the end of that session. And I must notice that many times this is not reachable. You can do a first step, and then you have to do some things, some rituals, some event between the first session and the next one, in order that the next one you reach the goal, or if you don't reach in the second one, in the third one. And in between, there need to be some activities. And this is something I described like re-enabling plain old voice call, walking around with mobile phones and having a conversation with fresh air while you're working. And also a way to have digital online co-creation on a digital whiteboard, because you don't have any boards, any flip chart anymore. And some roles you can enable between the participant, where you make sure you have something visual on the digital board at the end of the session, which gets anchored in the head and which help the people make a step forward. So there's a lot of tricks. And
yeah, and it's great. And your chapter, you do such a great job in your chapter, explaining and really taking through people how you're able to do that, so they're able to create those kind of environments themselves. So I want to thank our first 5 authors of the first 5 chapters. You did a great job here, and as I said, there's really a wealth of valuable lessons in those first 5 chapters on how to really enhance virtual meetings and how to do it. So I'm going to send you back to the green room. I'm going to ask everyone to just bear with us for a few seconds while I bring in our last 5 authors of this book. So hold on, people. So we're going to say goodbye. Deborah, we'll see you shortly. And Kristen, and I'm going to be bringing in our next 5 authors. So just bear with me for a second. So and Uta, I think we're missing Varda, so perhaps you could send her a text to ask her to join us here.
I will.
Okay, and let me see who else did I not bring in yet. I have, let me bring in Charlotte. There we go. So I think we're just missing Varda. But I am going to start with the introductions here. And Charlotte, we have Charlotte Weston Horstman. She's an executive coach and an intercultural communication specialist who is from Bernried, Germany. And Charlotte was also one of the authors in the first book. Then I'm going to move over to Karina Winberg. Karina is a leadership trainer. She's a coach and a group developer from Stockholm, Sweden. And she was also one of the authors in the first book. And then we have Patricia Dillon Saint. She's a change leader, a coach, and an author who's based in Fishers Island, Indiana, in the U.S. And Uta Franzen-Wakshe is a coach who works with individuals and teams to help them thrive. And she's also from Germany. And she, too, had a chapter in the first book. So welcome to all of you. And I'm just looking to see if we have found, Varda yet. But hopefully she'll join us. So this is what happens when you go live. Anything can happen. So hopefully hopefully we'll get in here. But what I wanted to do, just sort of a quick round robin to ask each of you, is how did you have to pivot your business during COVID? So I'm going to start with Charlotte, and you have to unmute. Okay, Charlotte is unmuted. Right. Okay, there we go.
Yeah, it was a two-pronged approach. Can you hear me?
Yes, and we found Varda now. Welcome, Varda. Let me just quickly introduce Varda. Varda Koppentrager is an executive and a team coach and facilitator, and she's based in Israel. So, Charlotte, tell us briefly how you pivoted your business. Charlotte, can you hear us?
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. So there were actually two aspects. I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. There were two aspects to this. There's a personal and the professional, and it was kind of scary on the personal level. On a personal level, it was a little too close to comfort because actually COVID started in Germany, 20 kilometers down the road at a company that I used to also not work for, but I was a coach for. And that was a start in Germany, Webasto, the company. And also there are friends in town here who had COVID, and it was a little bit scary. It was too close for comfort on the personal level. On the professional level, I was worried about losing my clients. I had done everything on site. And just in this time, the company was undergoing major changes, restructuring. So that was going on. And then COVID hit. And we thought, now, what are we going to do? And I was not a digital native, but I learned what I could in order to keep the job. And my clients, which is a team working with two team leaders, helped out because the people, the team, they were not savvy. They were not virtually savvy either. So it was like flying the plane while building it. But we did come together. We did find our modus operandi slowly and surely. And our main goal was to, with the restructuring, there was a lot of polarization with people, no, we want to keep it this way it was, and why does it have to change? And others saying, hey, it's no option. COVID, we have to change. So we were stuck in this dilemma. We're going to get to that. Thank you.
Yes, we're going to talk about that when we talk about your chapter in just a minute. But I love that description. I think we could all relate to that. It was like flying the plane as you're building it. That's a great apt description of what I think we all went through. So Varda, you're next. Just briefly tell us how, because then we want to talk about each of your chapters a little bit, but how you had to pivot your business during COVID.
So at first I thought that I was used to it.
I didn't catch it.
And then I realized that actually there were many things I didn't know, I didn't experience before. And I took my courage in hand with a colleague from Sweden, which I've never met in face-to-face. She's not in this group. And Karen Ulfian. And we just started a new group for new leaders, and it went really well. We managed to adapt what we should teach leaders in the real world to the virtual space.
Yeah, so that's great, Varda. And we've heard a theme here today too about how important support networks were to all of you during this. So that makes another case for that. So I'm going to move over now to Patricia. and just and I want to get to each of your chapters. So just briefly, how did your business have to pivot?
Thank you. So in my company, I do internal coaching, and we'd been doing it for quite a while. But what really shifted for me, I was like unaware. I thought this was just a bad flu season. So I had to really ramp up and realize this is significant. I had a trip planned to Switzerland that got canceled. Both of my sons were professionals, one as a basketball coach, another in sales. They were the ones that actually, it was the wake up call from them that led me to really shift into higher gear. So in our company, we had been doing virtual, but not across the organization. So it was ramping up and converting from workshops and trainings where you had to do it online and shift to new tools. And then people had to get used to doing meetings using, collaboration tools, the protocols, the courtesies, when to use your video camera, when to turn it off. If the dog barks, at first everybody was horrified, and then it became funny. Well, what's your dog's name? And the conversation will be, do you have other dogs? What else? Well, I have a dog. So it really, in some ways, it brought people together. We had a sense of connection. And I think one of the measures for me in some of the workshops that I do, which is organizational change, I've been doing it for many years, to pivot off what Katerina does or mention, is I do a lot about the change curve. And it was really a measure for me that if I could have a stakeholder management session or a conflict management session, a coaching session, and get people to role play virtually, that was a measure of success. So some challenges, but it was also a lot of fun.
That's great. Now I'm going to move over to Ute. So what were some of the pivotal moments for you? Like flying the plane as you built it.
Well, I was actually on the plane to the United States when it all started. We touched ground in the US on the 3rd of March, and a few days later, everything, went into lockdown, and I was on an international assignment accompanying my husband. And so, similar to what Charlotte said, my clients were in Europe. Now I was in the US. And so actually for my business, COVID was an opportunity because everyone had to finally move into the home office, had to work from home. And so it was easier to convince them that we could continue our work together in a remote and virtual environment. So for me, actually, that was a good development, even though all of that, what came on top of, this development with it and the repercussions that we are still feeling and experiencing were not so good. But that part helped my clients to make that decision to move from face-to-face encounters to virtual encounters.
Well, I applaud all of you because, there are so many new things everyone had to figure out and learn how to do, and you've all done them quite well. And now I want to start talking about your chapters, and we're going to go back to you, Charlotte. I can unmute you here if you like. Oh, no, you got to unmute yourself, apparently. So let me just tell you a little bit about Charlotte's chapter. Yep. So Charlotte, your chapter is called Continuity or Change. Is it a problem of polarity? And you give a really good example of polarity with the pandemic question, which is, should we focus now on preventative health care or a thriving economy? And you say if that is polarized into an either or, then neither will thrive. So tell us a little more about polarity. And you use a tool called the Polarity Map, which I think you had been using before the pandemic, but has probably become a very important tool for us to use in the future. So if you could just give us a few highlights about that, that would be terrific.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
You can hear me. Good.
Yes.
Yes, it was a great learning experience for me. Continuity or change, learning experience for all of us involved. And whenever you're tempted to say or about something, then think again. Either or. Is it this? Do I do this or do I do that? And think again. Is there a middle way to go? Yes, what I in the introduction, I talked a little about this, where the teams started polarizing into resistance about, why do we have to change? We don't want to. Great resistance. And on the other hand, there were the pioneers who were eager to explore and move forward and what can be done. And the main thing, of course, was bringing the teams together so that the workflow could continue. So what do you do? I was in the middle of this when COVID broke out, and to keep the energy going, or to keep the job going, I talked to the team leaders I was working with, and we pivoted, we switched. I was doing coaching for intercultural teams, Germans working with Americans. That was my mandate, but we changed because the focus was totally different. It was about bringing the teams together because they were falling apart. And so I brought in this adapted version. I called it the polarity model, which asks, what happens when you polarize? You have, on the one hand, you have independent pairs, and that can be, what sweater do I wear, the black one or the red one? That's an independent pair, one choice and the other is wrong, right or wrong. And then there are these interdependent pairs, like continuity or change. It's not one or the other. It's it's continuity and change. So that's where I said, think again. It's not either or. Where can you bring in the and? And using this model that it's explained in the book, we raised awareness for this. How do you leverage these two? Where are the fears? Where are the advantages? And slowly but surely, with the help of these two team leaders who were really enthusiastic about it, but they were gentle in bringing it to their people, we were able to bring these two together, to shift from either or thinking to and thinking.
Well,
and
that's Charlotte.
How can we both benefit? How can both sides benefit instead of?
Yes. So Charlotte, that's such a great point on the or and. And I think as we move into the future of work, with all the different decisions that are going to have to make, do I do hybrid or in person, or whatever those decisions are going to be, changing the or to and is such a valuable lesson. And it's a great chapter and many great lessons to be learned. So now I'm going to move over to Varda. And Varda, your chapter is titled Anu, and unmute yourself, by the way, Varda. And I'm not sure I pronounced it right because it's a new word and a new term. And you call it the opportunity to reconnect and co-create. And in your chapter, you talk about the impact of the pandemic on our social connectedness, and that, in order to survive, we need connections. And your chapter focuses on a new process and this new word, which I'll let you pronounce, and you actually created what you call your compass around this. So talk a little bit about what this is and how that can help the future of work.
Yeah, so I think it connects to Charlotte's because it's and as well. It's not either or. It's not just me or the we. It's both. So Anu is a compound word from Hebrew I invented. It's the compound of me in Hebrew. It's ani, and we, which is anu. So together it's anu. It doesn't exist And the idea is that what I found out during the pandemic is that I used to see people engage in helping each other in crisis. And suddenly people were actually quite polarized against each other. There were groups, and I was looking for a way to find a dynamic balance between the need of individuals, their uniqueness, their needs, what they're special about, and the way we could connect as a group of people. Could be a team, an organization, or even a country, or the global we. So we could be together and balance the needs of everyone, so we could survive and co-create and connect in a new way.
Well, in your chapter it's fascinating, and the way that you've worked through this is really I found really very, very interesting. So now we're going to move over to Karina. And your chapter is titled A Unique Web-Based Tool for Ranking Personal Values. And you say in the very beginning of your chapter that people who have knowledge and insight into their own personal values are much more committed and motivated in your personal lives and your business lives. But we know that during the pandemic that it's been a chance for many people to rethink what their values are on many, whether it's personal or work, and what's really important to me. And you have a tool that you've been using before the pandemic, but I think has become very, very important now, and it's all around values. So talk to us about values.
Yes, I will definitely do that. Thank you, Cheryl. The tool, I actually took my master trainer in the tool as the pandemic also started, because I saw that there will be a lot more use for this fantastic tool that you can use. And as you say, you do the ranking online, and it's a ranking of your personal values. And with this tool, you also can share with storytelling, also finding your personal values. Because if you walk on the street and ask somebody about, could you please tell me about your values? Yeah, well, values are important, but your personal values, they are not aware. So in the process of using this tool, Value Online, you will become aware of what your personal values are. And by living by them and living congruence and in balance and finding them, there is a lot of research being done since over 30 years, where you can see that you have a big influence, or you can almost raise your motivation and engagement up to 30% when you find your personal values. And it's also the one and only tool that we know that makes a distinction between normative values and personal values. A lot of people work with values, and they are usually normative, what you live by the company or the country, but your personal, that are really the ones that how I want to live. This is how I want to live. And then finding the congruence of living them, that's where you find the energy and where you really want to go.
Well, it's a really, really valuable tool. And the chapter is really fascinating because you explain it in a lot more detail. And I love that it's something that really anyone could use who's redefining what their values are right now, like so many of us are, and how we bring that together, our personal lives and our business lives, and understanding others. So thank you for sharing that. So now I'm going to move over to Patricia, and your chapter is titled Trust is the Glue to Organizational Change. And while organizations, and of course people too, are often very resistant to change, certainly the pandemic challenged organizations to operate very differently. And in your chapter, you talk about some of the tools that can help to enable change and and foster trust. So can you talk to us a little bit about how that works?
Absolutely. Trust is absolutely the most important part in gaining change. And it's personal. It's organizational, but it's also personal. So leaders have to be able to communicate what it is, the vision, what they're trying to do, and how they're going to get there. With the pandemic, I think it was so unique because it was so personal for all of us. And yet many teams and organizations as well had to change. And the way to do that, I mean, trust is a feeling. And so it develops over time. And I often think that when I look at some of the projects I've led or that I've been on, when you have trust, it's usually pretty significant because that will get you through the hard times. And guess what? You bond, you connect, and you build camaraderie. And that camaraderie will help you get to the end goal. You can have lots of tools. You can do a lot of work, but the number one thing is trust with people. Absolutely.
Well, that's such an important lesson, and again, it's another excellent chapter in the book that that everyone is going to get so much out of. And now I'm going to move over to Ute. So, Ute, you were also one of the authors of Volume 1 of Changing Conversations, and then in between that book and Volume 2. You actually wrote your own book, which was called How to Create a Successful Remote Workforce. You've been a very busy writer lately, right? And the theme of that book is actually carried into your chapter in Volume 2, and it's titled Smart Future Workplaces, Realistic Solutions for Tough Business Environments. And you talk about how organizations and individuals have to adapt to this new workplace. And you created a tool, and it's called the PPAS Maturity Model. So tell us about that model and how that can help lead us into a smarter work environment in the future and what that can look like.
Yeah, so thank you for that long introduction. It's really, as you said, in this chapter, we are looking at these end combinations that we've already heard so much about today. We are looking at how can we find the best future workplace scenario. And the PPAS maturity model that you mentioned is something that I've used before the pandemic, but really extensively during the pandemic. And now in this chapter 10 of the book, I'm with a leadership team and talking about a coach that accompanies a leadership team using the PPAS maturity model and its various dimensions, people, processes, application, and structures, which all have an influence on the way we work when we work remotely, when we work in a hybrid environment. And by walking the leadership team through each dimension of the model, they get a better understanding how complex and how multifaceted the attempts will be when we trying to move people back to the office, when we are trying to find hybrid work scenarios. And so the findings, I think, in the chapters are that there might not be a one-size-fit-all solution, but an end. And what can that end look like so that it works both for the organization and for the employee? We also take a look at the word smart that we see a lot when we look at new workplace solutions. We often see it collocated with, smart future workplaces, smart work. So what does it really mean when we look at the word smart in future workplace scenarios, and how can we really become smarter at finding solutions that work for both companies and employees? All about that in chapter 10.
It's great. So it's terrific because as I said, the book starts off in chapter 1 with all the stages we all went through. And we end the book with Ute's chapter looking at the future. And then in between, as you've heard, just some snapshots of today, there are so many valuable lessons from these coaches who really shared what they went through, their personal experiences, and most importantly, what they learned that all of you can take forward. And there's so many lessons here to be learned. So I really thank everyone who's joined us today from every corner of the globe. This has been very exciting. And before we leave, I want to try to bring in as many of the other authors as I can back in with us. If you're not here, it's only because I can only bring in 9 people on the screen, but I think I have everyone's here, because I want us all to lift a little glass of champagne or whatever is in your glass right now, because I want to salute these authors, the ones who are here right now, the ones who had to leave, and everyone in the European CIQ collective, because you, and the first book as well, you are doing so much to foster really important conversations that build trust, that create motivated teams, and that are going to make us all better people and help us to create future workplaces that build on shared values. So I salute you all. I'll try to do a big clink here. It's really hard. So I thank you. Again, the book is available on Amazon, booksellers everywhere. There are lessons here for everyone, I promise you. And I'm going to close out with our video. And
before you close, Cheryl, before you close, we would just like to thank you so much. And hopefully Stu is in the background with a token from all of us to add some smiles to your life right now. So
I'm glad you gave me a little warning this time, because last time I was yelling at him like, why is
I was being very polite.
So this is like from all of us. Thank you.
I've learned my lesson.
Thank you so much. You're all terrific. I'm going to close with our video, a reminder to get the book. I'm going to ask those of you who would like to just stay on when we end the broadcast, and I'll let you know when that happens. So thank you everyone for being part of this today. So